So do it again.
Prototyping for product service system innovation. And it was an insight specifically from the construction industry sector. So a quick rundown would be that the construction industry as a whole is a very traditional industry, typically focused on individual product innovation, and even to that point, more incremental innovation, where we continue to improve the products that we have, because that's the products that work, and we attempt to eke out as much peak performance as we can out of those. And what I'm looking at and investigating these days has been how we can sort of stepwise change this into not seeking to innovate incrementally towards a better individual solution, but looking for an entirely different style of solution that could have larger benefits, be they whatever values the customer has, be they sustainability, efficiency, safety, but as a whole solution, trying to develop new components to come together. And one of the strategies for doing that is by using product service systems. And within product service systems, you want to negotiate from a very specific need that will guide the whole system and all the subcomponents to be developed within that. Now, typically product service systems are developed as a servitization of sorts, where you take a product that works and then you add services to it, because it's the most straightforward example of how to go from a product to a product and a service. But in essence, that's not really taking advantage of the full opportunity available within product service systems, because the point is to deliver a solution, not just a product that does something better. So by designing an entire service, product, and system together to solve whatever the originating need is, you will wind up having a large transformative innovation in the way that things are completed and the products that complete them.
So what's been the main objective of your specific research work then?
And while what I've said so far is a lot of words and a lot of concepts, what I'm trying to do is to concretize that in a way that you want to do innovation, but innovation requires new ideas, new concepts, new ways of looking at things. And when we're doing this, we have all these opportunities available to us, and we have within all this opportunity, you approach and you arrive at a fair amount of ambiguity about what we can do, because the options are wide open. So how do we explore this? And so what I've been working on is utilization of physical prototypes to represent future product service system scenarios in which all of the diverse stakeholders that are required to be part of the product service system design, be they different people up and down the value chain, or be they other customers or providers that are going to be part of this solution as well, municipalities, construction companies, motor companies, anybody that has a part to play in the overall solution. So by bringing them together over this functional prototype of the actual future scenario, we've been looking at how this sort of change in how we view prototypes and product service systems can facilitate this more organic and completely evolutionary style of conversation piece that guides and directs people well outside of their comfort zone from traditional solutions. So you have traditional providers coming together and incorporating new technologies and new ways and coming up with completely different solutions that can change the game as we know it.
So what's been the more specific industrial case that you've been working on?
Okay, yeah. So I've had the opportunity to work alongside this electric site demonstration project that, with Volvo Construction, has been working on a full-scale implementation of autonomous haulers and electric or hybrid electric vehicles and loading machines to completely electrify a construction site, or in that case, it was a quarry. And what we wanted to do initially was test and develop certain conceptual products that would be part of the system. And initially it was, how do people interact with these specific haulers and these autonomous machines, because it changes the whole interaction between human-machine interface. So we built this scaled down site, a 5 meter by 5 meter scale site that represented to some degree the generalized scenarios happening on that site with a wheel loader loading situation, an excavator loading situation, and two autonomous haulers that were automatically replacing each other and conducting their business. So what we did there was it really enabled us to contextualize the concept that we were initially trying to test, and enabled people giving us feedback on this, this HoloLens interaction with an autonomous machine. Give us very specific feedback on that. What sort of information would they want when they're approaching a machine? What kind of warnings? What do you want to be able to interact with this machine? And that was the targeted inquiry during that research. But the surprise and what became the more interesting piece to continue on with was the fact that the site itself and this scaled down representation of the electric site was capable of really conveying this message of the future scenario, and just that it is not something that's being talked about, not something that's in pictures or videos, but even at its scaled down site, that it was real. You could pick the machines up; they actually moved, and you can control. And you could control the loading machines, and people are actually having interactions with these autonomous machines. And so, the second phase was really all about really exploring as much as I possibly could with the most relevant stakeholders. So I had the opportunity of demonstrating this site at a very specific event where there were customers up and down the value chain within construction. There were actual management within the Volvo construction company that were there. And there was also the press, which was an interesting, different perspective to take on it. But through that experience, we were able to expose people to a site that at the time didn't actually exist in reality. The individual machines existed, but the site and its functionality didn't really wasn't happening at that point. So we were able to take a future scenario that didn't really exist and bring it to people in another country where it doesn't exist, and also then create these very contextualized conversations that had tangible outputs of and questions and inquiry, and it just raised the level of discussion around the concept to a very higher, more tangible level that people could, create and innovate from.
So, if you look at it from the kind of research perspective, then what was the most important result from this?
I'd say the secondary result from the initial inquiry being that while in product service system design, there's plenty of literature that discusses how to and the value of prototyping within PSS design. And the challenge there is that, with PSS you have many tangible and intangible components, you have a whole system that works, so it becomes challenging to bring people in. But through the challenge of people, the servitization aspect made it much simpler. So it was more known elements being slightly reorganized and put to work for the same purpose, but just organized with some services tied in there. So those prototypes were represented as basically flowcharts and simple diagrams, or not so simple diagrams, but diagrams nonetheless. So these two-dimensional representations of what we're talking about. And others have worked on physical prototypes through the PSS innovation design process as well. But again, we still find that it is, or I found that it was more, again, redistribution of known elements being combined into something that was not much different than what the initial product was itself. So by doing this sort of prototype where you bring in machines that don't exist, put them in a scenario that doesn't exist, and you're still able to get people to have high level of discourse around the design decisions that need to be made, and also able to bring in customers and other people as co-creators to provide new concepts, not just give you feedback, but actually be able to have the level of understanding that they can, provide insight into the scenario and help navigate what these new interactions are and what they should be and what they could be as well. So the research aspect was practical as well as academic, in the sense that design research is both practical and academic, and if we don't affect practice, then what do we really do?
So if you talk about contributions, then if you take from the industrial practice perspective, what's the usefulness for industry for this type of work?
Okay. So Well, I qualify that building a 5 meter by 5 meter scale site and building all these functional machines isn't exactly going to be the right solution for every scenario and every new innovative PSS idea that we come up with. It did seem to be the fact that if you approach what in pedagogy we call a learning threshold or a threshold concept, in an industry we could call it the stepwise change. So this transformative change from one style of solving a need to a very different style of solving a need. Be it, for example, say, when you call a taxi, that's a service. You call a taxi and you get a service, and that's an addition service to car ownership. Instead of car ownership, you can call a taxi. But a transformative change from that was, wow, any car can become a taxi through an Uber service. So what I'm seeing here is that when we have these very different changes, especially in such a traditional and conservative industry, you need to bring in the people that are going to be the customers and also the providers that are used to this old style and get them all around this new style and to be able to understand where we want to go and then also feel like they can provide input so that they are part of the solution and not just going to be sold to.
Okay, so if we take the other kind of twist here on the contributions towards education or teaching, or you are also going to do some teaching, well, how could this results be used in the more basic educations or master's education?
Yeah. So I guess like I said in the last one was we were discussing this concept of threshold concepts, and when we do design teaching or teaching around design, the concept of building prototypes is, there's dozens of different, not even dozens, there's almost infinite different ways that prototypes can be built, and they're all built for different reasons. And so exploring this was a way to affect the learning around probably PSS design is one of the courses that we work around. So showing students that it's possible to build something that isn't maybe the prototype that you're working on, but also you're building a scenario in which you can then innovate new concepts around. So using this to help, one similar to industry, help navigate a learning objective that takes you beyond this threshold concept, so that people can be part of the problem and understand the context that you're trying to solve a new solution for.
So if you take your personal journey here as well, what's been your sort of personal most interesting learning outcome from doing this licentiate phase?
My personal learning outcome, well, I mean, it's similar, I think, to the whole journey of getting to Sweden and being a PhD in general, is that you move forward doing things that are interesting and do it from a research perspective. You always have some sort of guideline plans of how you're approaching things that you make decisions, values or priorities that you make decisions about. And then when you discover these new details or new phenomena or something that stimulates you in a new way, then you can follow that. And as long as you do it from a structured approach, life and research are kind of hand in hand in that sense, that you follow your passions, and if you follow your passions in a structured format, then it works out really well.
Mm-hmm. So if you would do your PhD studies here, I mean, you've been doing this for a few years now. Mm-hmm. If you would do that all over again, what would you do differently?
What would I do differently? I think I would have to try to get into the understanding of organizing the research approaches and understanding, because coming from being a master's student and being an engineer and being all those things together, your instinct is to just go out and do stuff. You want to just go and build and explore, and it's part of the process as well. But when you want to do it from a research perspective, really understanding where you're going and why you're what you're attempting to go towards, or how you're structuring your approach towards your exploration,